This podcast is recorded on stolen and unceded Aboriginal land.
We acknowledge the First Nations and elders of this country, and we join their calls for justice.
Are you still in mourning, Emerald?
Oh, yeah, that's why I'm still wearing black.
Obviously. On the weekend, it's just extraordinary. Over the weekend, I drove past the McDonald's and they were flying the Macca's flag at half mast.
Wait, what? No, they weren't.
They were. And have you seen the images of inside McDonald's? And they've just got the image of the Queen on like the order.
I've seen that. That's very good. Yeah, it is like as you're just going about your daily life, just seeing that image of the Queen everywhere,
yes.
like you're just like watching over you. There's this massive screen in King George Square in the middle of the city in Brisbane with just her looking down on you, and it's very disconcerting.
Obviously, when I saw the Macca's flag flying out, I pulled over
saluted.
and I got out. Well, I put my hand over my heart and I sang the national anthem.
That's good, Tom. I love it when you try out your stand-up bits here first.
I've been doing that on stage. It's been killing.
Yeah,
so fuck you.
I bet.
It's been killing. I haven't been dying, unlike the Queen.
Good one. No, we understood where you were going there.
Talk about the Greens, that bunch of idiots.
I don't trust them with a republic. I don't trust them with a treaty. I don't trust them with any change. They've got too much hatred for our past, too much hatred for our institutions.
Frankly, I've always found the Greens to be a real serious danger to Australia.
That's comedy. And this show, also comedy. What it's not, Official Greens podcast, but it's Serious Danger, a podcast about green politics in Australia. Welcome, friends. This podcast, this comedy podcast, this politics podcast is made possible with the help of Green Institute, and it's produced by the lovely Michael Griffin. On this week's episode, what are we doing? We're talking about, obviously, just the week of Queen Reacts. That's Reacts with an X, by the way. And we're talking to Lulu from Respect Inc., which is a sex worker org in Queensland, about celebrating sex worker pride.
It was Sex Worker Pride on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Yeah. Huge shout out and love to all our new patrons. Thank you so much for supporting the show. Go to patreon.com/seriousdangerau. Anything you can spare to help us do this show is very much appreciated. It pays the wage of the Griff. Big thank you to Trent, Hugo, Stephen, Eva, Melissa, Chaz, Matthew, Angus, and Tristan. We now got 416 patrons, Emerald. Can you believe it?
I almost can't, to be honest, but I like to.
I like to believe it. If you become a patron, you will get bonus content. And this week we released a new Patreon app with Rob Lecter, a.k.a. at DJ Robstep on Twitter, who is a world-renowned superannuation critic, and we got into the real nitty-gritty about Australia's superannuation system. And I know that sounds boring, but it's actually not. It's actually like super interesting. And
I haven't even listened. Should I listen? I'm not a Patreon subscriber. No, I can probably still listen. I can probably still find it.
Well, for just $3 a month, you can support the show.
For just $3 a month. That's right.
Really fascinating, the left-wing critique, laying it all out about the idea about what super is, why it's fucked, and why it really does matter. It's a massive part of Australia's political economy, and Rob is really across it. He just launched a campaign, Workers Against Super, a whole bunch of left-wing people sort of trying to make these critiques, because if you listen to the Labor Party, the union movement, it's the best thing ever.
It's the pinnacle of leftism, yeah.
It's
progressivism
so good.
is superannuation.
Yeah, not so much. Really recommend that episode. You can also catch up on previous episodes with Will Anderson, Tom Tanicki. We played Rusted on Bingo with John Kudelka, and much, much more. Patreon.com/seriousdangerau.
Do it, or I'll kill you like I killed the Queen.
That's a bit of a trying on stage. I was just sort of saying, yeah, I did it. Yeah. Justice for Diana. That's funny.
Yeah. No? Well, I'm trying to be enthusiastic. I'm trying to give you good, positive feedback here.
I'm saying 96 years old, that's a pretty good run, especially for Lizard, you know.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Any other ones? No? Oh.
No, don't worry about it.
That's good.
So the world's been reacting. It's hard to think of too much else to talk about this fucking week, for God's sakes. And I think there was some more that we could get into the nitty-gritty that we didn't get to last week, when obviously the news had just been broken on the morning of our recording.
Can I interrupt? Is nitty-gritty a probo term? I think I read somewhere that it might have racist origins.
Really?
Yeah, I think it does. Yeah.
Why?
I
How
forget
so?
what they are. It's like something about like slaves being transported on ships being referred to as something inhuman. This is like very niche. I don't know, but I think it is. I think it does have racism. Anyway, maybe we can have like a rhetoric conversation about whether, when no one really knows what the racist origin is, whether it's still problematic to use it.
It has been suggested that the word originally referred to the debris remaining in the holds of slave ships after the slaves had disembarked, but there is no evidence of such use before the 20th century when slavery was prevalent.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
Question mark. Anyway. Speaking of slavery and racism, the Queen died.
Yeah, that was a segue.
I want to talk about Australia, the reaction here, but obviously have you been seeing all this shit in the UK? People getting arrested, people holding up signs saying "Not My King," people holding up blank signs, being approached by police saying that if you write "Not My King" on there, then you'll be arrested for breaching the peace. A guy yelled out at Prince Andrew, calling him a dirty old man. Which was fucking hilarious. He got taken away by police and was sort of saying, totally true. I mean, truly a broken country, and they're clinging on to all the respect, and you cannot say anything nasty or mean or critical whatsoever of this institution, even as this motherfucker is getting immediately ascended to the throne, like just right off the bat. She's not even, hasn't been buried yet, and we've already got the king straight away. Have you been following much of that?
Truly sinister to actually watch the monarchy and the state like scrambling to retain control at a moment that they clearly identify as a potential weak point. Like, I think Jono here in Queensland, Jono Sriranganathan posted about this, that he could see the way that they were like enforcing their rule at this point, and it's fucking terrifying. When particularly, there's like the funny culture wars stuff, but then it's like literally arresting people for holding up a sign.
The double standard is crazy, right? Once the conflict in Ukraine was kicking off, there was all this image of protesters in Russia, being arrested because they were the Russian people who were protesting against their nation's, illegal invasion of that country. And of course, the Western media, political heads were all saying that, look at this terrible country and how repressive they are. And then apparently you can't do that. In the West, it's totally fine to arrest people and protect the peace whatsoever. Yeah. And the idea that political commentators cannot see all of this as political, right? Like Anthony Albanese saying, now is not the time for politics. We're not doing anything political now. We're all just carrying on and mourning in our own ways. Like, no, you motherfucker. It's all political from the top down. What are you talking about?
Yeah, the now is not the time for politics discourse. I mean, we've spoken about this before. That's always frustrating whenever someone's like, we can't talk about the politics now. They're fucking hiding something and they're shady and I hate them. You're politicizing this. But like, yeah, what does that mean? Politicizing it, what they actually mean is just saying something that they don't like or that threatens like their position.
Yes. Or that there's any disagreement about a thing. I mean, again, this constant need for national unity, the myth of a national identity. We're all Australians. We all agree on something. Can't we all just put our differences aside and unquestioningly commemorate and underline the importance of this institution? That's what they want, right? All the questions, the debates, all the critiques, all the facts about the history and the impact of colonialism and the British Empire, all that needs to be put to one side and completely sanitized out of the picture. Let's just focus on this grandma who died and made us feel nice and made us feel good about our state in the world. And when things are so fucked at the moment, obviously I think there's a huge level of nostalgia and investment and a desire to have this figurehead praised to make people feel safe and better about the state of the world and about our institutions. Surely that's got to be part of it, right?
I have to say it's actually one of those things where this week I have started to be like, am I out of touch? Do I need to door knock? Because there was a genuine mismatch between my expectations and the response to the Queen's death. And I think when we recorded last week and we'd literally just learned that it had happened. And I was like, oh, this is probably a point that we will begin a discussion about becoming a republic. And that was, I just assumed that would be a fairly moderate, middle of the road response to this. And that general, like the most common response from the majority of people would either be apathy or even like, oh, you know, about time. I genuinely didn't understand that there would be an expectation that we would grieve or mourn as a nation, and that would be ordinary people, not just fucking like conservative weirdos. Let alone, that there would be this thing that you're not even able to like mention that you don't feel sad that the Queen died. This again, like this is what Jono was sort of talking about. He's like, I'm not, you know, saying that you shouldn't be able to mourn the Queen if that's really how you feel, go off. But why is there this expectation that you're not even literally allowed to say, here's what, like, to not actively express your allegiance to the Queen? It blew my mind. I was really surprised. I'm really surprised still.
I was talking with a friend last night about it. There's a comedian, a British comedian who now lives in Australia who apparently is a monarchist, which I was quite surprised by. But anyway, he posted, he's like, Republicans, you know, just think about if your mum had just died, right? And you just needed some space to just in that moment. Well, exactly. Needed some moment to just really think about that and just have that moment. And then someone comes up to you and says, actually, I think your mum was a bitch and she sucks. So we should get rid of it. It's exactly like that. It's not. It's really not that.
You know what I was saying last night? I was talking about this last night to someone. And the thing where people are like, a lot of the responses that I've heard are people go, well, she seemed like a nice lady. She seemed at least individually like a good person. And I'm like, based on what? I don't think I've ever seen her say something. I cannot think of a moment I've heard her say anything. Okay, so she gives a speech at Christmas. Literally, I don't know what her voice sounds like. I can see her doing a little wave. I don't know anything about her. Well, I just saw someone post that apparently they found she had like a Wii gaming, so maybe she was a gamer. There's something about that. Maybe an injection of personality that you could like have some sort of affection for her. But yeah, when people like, she seemed like a nice lady. Based on what? Her signing things? Her waving?
Yeah, based on all the propaganda, or based on all the ruling class propaganda.
I don't understand it. Did you see?
Like this, by the way, my husband and I.
Yeah.
Oh, Emerald, my loyal subject. I do appreciate all your dedication. What? I paid for my pedophile son to. I helped out his court case with my money. The Labour Party is a neoliberal, outdated institution. My husband and I are not pleased with the way they're fucking over the working class of the state of Queensland. My state.
Ordinary people are doing it tough.
You can't be pro-business and pro-worker.
Serious about climate change.
The climate wars are over. What?
Look, stop. That's enough.
Right,
did you see this op-ed? I actually thought it was quite good by Cameron Atfield in the Brisbane Times, I think, surprisingly, which was, the headline is, "Now's not the time to talk about the Elizabeth line," but it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek op-ed. I think it's tongue-in-cheek.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, it is. It must be tongue-in-cheek. The fucking LNP in Brisbane, the LNP have called for one of our train lines to be renamed the Elizabeth line in honour of Queen Elizabeth II.
And there's thank you so much. I love nothing more than taking trains around the Brisbane metropolis.
Thank you for finding. I would love nothing more than for the people of Brisbane to give me a good old ride, just to ride me. Though I may be dead, I still like to be ridden. Not
for free though. You have to pay.
Not for free. That's right. Quite a lot of money. Let's stop doing the accent. I think for the rest of the episode, yeah.
Okay. Let's move into racial accents. I think that's good.
Anyway, okay, big argy-bargy because the LNP called for this. First of all, such a stupid idea. Like, it would be very confusing. All of our other lines are named after just like suburbs. It's not like the London Metro where they have all these weird names for things. It would just be confusing and stupid. But the LNP did this full launch of their campaign and they put up a petition where obviously they're getting the names of everyone who signs their little petition to rename the Elizabeth line. They have a good kick at Labor or whatever. Labor responds going, oh my God, you are using the Queen's death to harvest data. How could you? Do people know that you're taking their data from this petition? Which, first of all, whenever a fucking, like a political party calling out another political party for harvesting data via petition is just so funny to me. Like, shut up, bro. Like, we're all doing it. We're doing it right now. The Greens are doing it. You're doing it. The LNP's doing it. You guys even fucking do it at election time via postal votes, which is genuinely fully dodgy and misleading. Yeah. Like, shut the fuck up then. And second of all, like that the response to that was like, how could you use this occasion? You're politicizing this. It's so ridiculous. And just like that as a microcosm, a very Queensland, Brisbane microcosm of this, like everyone else is politicizing the Queen. And when I, for some reason, think that it's my role to publicly say how I feel about the Queen and to be the most grieviest and the most mourningest, that's not politicizing it, but you are because I don't like you. I don't know.
Prime Minister, can you relate to King Charles's frustration at his pen not working? You're often in those situations where you're doing something publicly. Do you get it?
Look. It's a human response. We're all humans.
Yes.
And, these things happen. And you've got to remember as well that King Charles has lost not just the sovereign, he's lost his mum.
All right, let's do a quick hit of some of these classic wonderful moments that shows just how fucked it all is. Of course, there was the footage of Prince Charles being an arsehole going viral, of him shooing away certain objects and expecting people to take them away from him. People just take objects out of his hand when he's done with them. We heard a lot of stories about servants being told to take things out of waste paper baskets for him because he refuses to deign to pick that stuff out. Apparently, he gets his toothpaste squeezed onto his toothbrush for him by servants.
No. Is this the most unlikable man on earth?
Well, but it's like, first of all, the Queen was absolutely doing that shit. Okay, maybe she was better at hiding it. She wasn't as public as Prince Charles, but it was all happening. And what else would you expect to have happen? You are not a normal person if from the moment you were born, you were in line for the throne of a giant empire and waited on hand and foot every single moment of the day. The Queen was not down to earth, you motherfucking idiots. Anyone who says that, ridiculous.
But it's a thing of like, at least she was better at hiding it. I mean, that video of him, it's the way he holds his face, his facial expressions.
Yes.
And the total disdain, like when he's like angrily gesturing at the servants, being like, move this thing for me, move it. I can't. Oh, I hate this. And like swearing, like doing a Kevin Rudd on camera, like losing it.
This fucking language.
Yeah. It's really not a good look, buddy. But keep going because, if we are going to eventually get a republic, you're helping.
Yeah, you're certainly helping. All right, in Australia, the story this morning, Australia's parliament is being suspended longer than the UK parliament, which is
because
insane.
We're more respectful and mourning.
I guess so. We need to do more mourning. That's important. Yep. And crazy story about the Melbourne Writers' Festival cancelling a panel on the future of the monarchy. Okay, this is featuring Dennis Altman, Julia Baird, who I think is a Republican, Peter Fitzsimons, the head of the Australian Republican Movement, and Tila Reid as well, the First Nations lawyer and activist who wrote a great opinion piece about how fucked it was and how ridiculous. Of course, you should have that conversation now more than ever, and you could do that in a way that I suppose isn't deeply disrespectful.
Makes a lot of sense. It's a thing that's happening now. It's current affairs. Yes, in the news is the relationship of Australia to the monarchy. Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it, baby.
Yeah.
Because also, I remember everyone talking about a republic saying, oh, we won't talk about a republic until Queen Elizabeth dies.
Literally,
that was the line.
That's why I thought this was just, I thought we agreed. And now everyone is acting like I'm the crazy one. I feel gaslit.
Solidarity to Caitlin Moran, the NRLW player, who tweeted on the day
best post of the whole saga so far, surely.
She tweeted, today's a good fucking day. Uncle Luke, it's a musician, announces his tour and this dumb dog dies. Happy fucking Friday. Just incredible. Like just a great posting sort of situation there. And the outrage about that has been insane. Some outlets would not post that tweet. They would not represent. It was so offensive that Channel 9 refused to actually report on what the post was.
Yeah, I did. That is, they're like, we cannot show this. I mean, think about all of the things that you've probably seen on Channel 9 in the past, like just blatant racism, like
Yes.
whatever
Israel
it
Folau
is.
saying that gays are go to hell. We reproduced that. Here's the post, everyone. Check it out. You can
It's
make up your own
fine.
mind. That's no worries.
Often deeply like violent, graphic, even traumatic footage they'll show, but not someone saying dumb dog.
This dumb dog. Ray Hadley said it was the most reprehensible thing he'd ever seen connected to rugby league.
Even it's like, first of all, it's like it's kind of weird to specify connected to rugby league, and then it's like, wow, it's really weird to specify connected to rugby league.
And she has been suspended. She had 25% of her pay suspended, and she has to go into a re-education camp to learn how to do social media posts. That's insane.
It's
and solidarity,
it's,
Caitlin Moran.
again, fucking honestly terrifying. Like, it makes me sick. Like, that, yeah, we as a country are like, no, send the black girl to a re-education camp for, like, not fucking saluting the Queen.
Jesus Christ. All right, what do you think of the Maureen Faruqi v. Pauline Hanson v. Jackie Lambie hoo-ha? Maureen Faruqi tweeted, "Condolences to those who knew the Queen. I cannot mourn the leader of a racist empire built on stolen lives, land, and wealth of colonised peoples. We are reminded of the urgency of treaty with First Nations, justice, and reparations for British colonies, and becoming a republic."
Disgusting. How could
Absolutely
she?
filthy. Pauline Hanson, a racist piece of shit, tweeted, "Your attitude appalls and disgusts me. When you immigrated to Australia, you took every advantage of this country. You took citizenship, bought multiple homes, and a job in Parliament. It's clear you're not happy, so pack your bags and piss off back to Pakistan."
Yeah, like fully just 90s style racism.
Go back to where you came from, just blatantly, right?
Yeah. No, but Australia isn't a racist country.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
And then working class hero Jackie Lambie got involved and said, "You're absolutely right,
Jackie.
Pauline. There you go." She took personal offence, of course, thought that Maureen Faruqi was calling her personally racist, even though that she said explicitly condolences to those, I guess, who knew the Queen, and just expressing her personal relationship to the idea of mourning a leader of a racist empire. Jackie Lambie took that personally offensive and said, "Yeah, Pauline, yes, Pauline, Queen, you're absolutely right. You should tell another senator to go back to the country where she came from." What a fucking disgrace.
Yeah, I mean, but this is the thing that I've seen from a few people, and it gets to the point where it's like, is this a deliberate misinterpretation of what people like the Greens are saying when they dare to suggest that this is a point to think about the relationship that we have to the monarchy, or that this is also a point to look at Indigenous sovereignty before we become a republic. But what people take is, you're calling me a racist for mourning the Queen. Because, and this has been said before, I think that, yeah, the most horrible insult that you can apparently it's worse to call someone a racist in Australia than it is to actually be racist. And people are just always ready to, for some reason, they're always on edge and very defensive. And even when you don't say they're a racist, they're like, "You're calling me a racist for some reason." And they freak out about that.
There was a news.com.au article saying, like, referring to Maureen Faruqi's tweet as a slur. Like, she was slurring the Queen or other people.
What's
including
the slur?
Pauline Hanson. Exactly. Like racist, I guess? Or I guess she's slurring the Queen
but again,
and the
she says,
legacy of the empire.
She didn't even say the Queen is racist. She says she led a racist empire. Like, what more do you like? The
Queen was
empire did
racism.
Racist. It did slavery. It colonized and fucking like. It's racist. But people are like, "You are personally calling me racist." Because again, and I think we've had this conversation before, it comes back to the way that we understand racism in this country, and that it's often like the mainstream understanding of racism is as an individualized fault of a person. And so people, I think, genuinely cannot understand racism as a structural, like as a structural critique and as of a critique of an institution. Instead, they're looking for the person to whom the accusation of racism is attached, and they decide that it's either, it's the Queen or it's them personally. Yeah. And how dare you insult me that way? Because I'm not a bad person. I'm not a racist.
I'm not a racist. Now fuck off back to Pakistan.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Even when they literally, I mean, when it comes to Pauline, yes, she is an individual racist.
Shout outs to all the individual races doing great individual racist work across the nation.
Yeah.
Look, some other great instances. The Honi Soit page, the Sydney University student paper, had a front page that was basically saying Queen's dead, Charles next.
something like that. It had a whole, it had this like, and a mock-up of, the Queen lying dead and Charles standing over her. Like, honestly, I even thought that was pretty hectic to put that image on the front page, but like, it's a student newspaper and like the message presented, who fucking cares? I do like that student newspapers are being more spicy at the moment. I feel like there's a resurgence of spicy student newspapers.
And the obviously this content was so spicy that the news.com.au, or I think the Australian, had a warning, like a content warning before showing it, protecting it from people.
This is,
I guess it'd be something like some kind of trigger warning, I suppose. It's almost like these people are fucking snowflakes.
Triggered?
And they can't...
triggered snowflakes. It's funny. They're like sobbing at they're like quarantining the number of people who had to work on this story to protect the younger and more junior staff from seeing the on his front page.
Protect their feelings. But look, I mean, it is remarkable. As you said, you could very reasonably expect that this would be a chance to have a conversation, a meaningful conversation about the Republic. And we didn't actually get onto it last week when we were sort of talking about the Queen's death. It was just funny. We were just having a good old chuckle last week. But I suppose whether this possibility is a real thing, whether that conversation is seriously going to be had, whether we as a country can have a conversation about our constitutional arrangements and whether we should be a constitutional monarchy or a republic. Roy Morgan did release a poll that said, found an increasing majority of Australians, 60%, believe Australia should remain a monarchy, while only 40%, that's down 5 percentage points, say Australia should become a republic with an elected president.
Oh, wait, when did this come out?
This is very recently. This is in the wake of the Queen's death.
As in pre-death? Oh, post-death.
Post-death, yes.
Interesting.
Which is, a lot of people have said, there was all this fondness for the Queen. There was a surge of fondness for the institution, I suppose, in the wake of that. And yes, rather than most people sort of thought, oh, once the Queen dies, then we'll be ready for the conversation. It seems, at least in the immediate aftermath, the opposite has happened. People have a lot of fondness for and yearning for stronger ties with the monarchy in the UK. What do you make of that?
It's really surprising. Again, it makes me feel uncomfortable because I don't like it when I feel like I can't understand what is motivating all these people who apparently want to remain part of the monarchy. I genuinely cannot understand it from like a class perspective. I just can't. I don't get it. And again, I'm trying to understand why. I know there was earlier, like from polling from a few years ago, that indicates that the age divide is the opposite to what you think, and that younger people tend to be more likely to support retaining ties to the monarchy as opposed to becoming a republic. Like, why?
Why is that the case? This is a piece from Osman Faruqi, which is really great. He also makes the point that the sort of leadership, the public face of the Australian Republican movement are old fucks, Malcolm Turnbull and Peter Fitzsimons. And he's sort of saying, hey, you should have young people. I mean, young people don't get listened to about anything, of course, but it would be cooler to have some young people speaking openly about this. But actually, the more I think about it and reading Osman's piece, I did find myself coming back to this position in which I have an understanding of ambivalence towards Australia becoming a republic. In that, it seems that the model that most Republicans in this country have settled on is something that wouldn't change anything, okay?
Yeah.
Like, what does it actually mean for us to become a republic? And from what I can tell, it means a directly elected figurehead. Much, I think the similar kind of Irish model. So the people vote for a president, and that president is a figurehead, and that they do that they're expected not to be a political actor in any way, and they just do all the duties of a head of state, a figurehead kind of situation.
Like the Governor General kind of does.
Like the Governor General, you just turn that, and Ellsman has a moment in his piece where he sort of says, if the whole deal is, Control Alt Find Governor General and replace with President, if that is seriously the end result of things, in a entirely symbolic liberal institution concept of us freeing ourselves and being a grown-up country, I can understand why that's not a very attractive proposal for anyone and why lots of people are suspicious of change. And there's not particularly a compelling narrative there. Does it actually change, redistribute wealth or power to ordinary people in any way? It doesn't seem so. And so the case of the Republic, to me, I am a Republican. I think the monarchy is fucking ridiculous and stupid, and maybe just getting rid of them is enough for me to sort of get excited about a campaign. But seriously, the offer, or what we're talking about to people about what it would actually mean and how it would change their lives or the way this country operates, there's not a lot there. And I was surprised to find myself feeling that way.
Do you think it would change, if it is coupled with that we're talking about a process of truth-telling and treaty-making and redoing the structure of the nation effectively, becoming a republic that incorporates that process of justice for First Nations people. Like, I feel as though surely that would change the view of at least younger people, but maybe I'm being optimistic.
No, I agree with you. I just don't think that's there. Like, that's not in the conversation. People are so terrified of losing again another referendum that complicating any of that stuff in there.
I think that's what the Greens were trying to do. Like, I think that,
yes.
Obviously the first, it seems as though not many Greens MPs commented initially on the Queen's death. The process was that Adam came out first with a tweet or two.
Yeah.
And his tweet was like very measured. And it was about... It was about what we've just said, but he was still attacked for it somehow. Yeah. And again, genuinely surprising to me. I don't know.
It was the pivot, I suppose. We can't start talking about it. It was the too soon discourse, the same kind of bullshit attack, which of course is, as ridiculous as we've covered.
Discourse, yeah. The too soon, the thing of, when everyone's talking about something is not the time to talk about it.
Finally, I'm interested in your thoughts on the public holiday stuff. I mean, there was this incredible reaction from some people about how we shouldn't have a public holiday to mourn the Queen's passing because, again, we are a nation of cops and teachers' pets and cucks. It has been announced it's a 4-day weekend for Victoria, so I'm fucking stoked. I think it's great.
Yeah.
Some people saying we shouldn't have a public holiday because Queen Elizabeth worked every day of her goddamn life. And she never complained. Yeah. And the greatest tribute to her would be to go to fucking work. Actually abolish the weekend in tribute to just how hard Queen Elizabeth was working
really, really hard. This is, again, surprising to where I'm like, I didn't expect, like, I think I said last week, I was like, I hope we get a new public holiday. Let's get lots of new public holidays. Fucking love public holidays. The Greens, particularly the Queensland Greens, have kind of a bit of like a running joke because I think back in before my time, like back in 2017 maybe, one of the initiatives we announced during the state election was a bunch of new public holidays and everyone lost their minds. And it was one of the biggest, like we got the most coverage on it, got the most kind of criticism from mainstream media and the major parties about adding new public holidays, which sounds fucking epic to us. But there's that criticism and there's people being like, you just don't want to work and people should be working harder. And also then there's people talking about small business. But then I saw also there is critique of a sudden public holiday from the left, pointing out that for insecure workers, that can have genuinely a really significant impact on their ability to pay the bills that week or eat that week, which is true. Because if you just suddenly plonk a public holiday where people then cannot work because their business is closed and they lose a day of income, for people like you and me, Tom, we're like, great, public holiday, have that privilege of just having a day off. But for some people, that means they are not going to have enough money to eat that week because we have such fucked up, like low wages, fucked up low social security payments and a lack of job security. And
they're not suspending, all the bills that you have to pay for the sake of mourning. I think it's inappropriate to charge people rent while we're mourning the Queen, to be honest.
Yeah.
But apparently, that's all still carrying on. And you're right. I came around on this a lot too. I listened to Owen Jones and Navarro Media making the point. It's just an example of how precarious our economy is. And when you suddenly throw people into a public holiday with no notice, then it causes a lot of concern. And obviously it's a decision made by people who are perfectly comfortable, who can do with a day without an income coming in, without thinking about what kind of situation that puts a lot of people in. I also didn't realize that they don't do chemotherapy on public holidays. That is kind of fucking insane to me. But apparently our health system doesn't do that in some instances, which does seem quite odd.
And so you can imagine, if you were getting chemo that you needed, you'd probably be like, great, well, I still have cancer.
Yes.
That needs treatment, and sorry that the Queen died, but now I may also die.
Why didn't the Queen cure my cancer if she was so good? I mean, she should have come through.
Yeah. The public holiday discourse, like it kind of reminds, it's one of those things where it gets confusing because we are talking about the reality of implementing what in theory is a good thing under a different economic system, if that makes sense. And so we have to look at it in the context of widespread precarity and poverty among working people and poor people. But at the same time, I think it is important to recognize that, you know, long-term, more public holidays would be a good thing. People should work less. We should have a 4-day work week, and we should all be paid more, and Social Security should be higher. The thing about the suspending chemotherapy, I'm like, that seems, I don't understand that. I'm like, why, in reality, in the real world, what is the actual logistical reason that they've gone, this is one thing that just doesn't go ahead on public holidays? I don't get that.
Well, again, I mean, it's just another sign of, particularly if you're in the private system, I assume people are getting chemotherapy through private specialists and stuff. And again, the economic realities of having to pay people to do stuff, meaning that
because they'd have to pay them more.
Parts of the health system cannot do what it should be doing, which is providing healthcare to everybody.
It's kind of
when they need it.
It's almost straying back into essential versus non-essential worker discourse,
right?
Isn't it?
Well, I mean, again, in the UK, I don't think it'll be like this in Australia, but in the UK, on that day, it's like McDonald's is not open. Okay, it's like people are fucking shutting down, and some people are like, you will need to stock up at your local supermarket because the chances of you being able to go to an open business on the day is actually very low. It is like actual shutdown. It is more lockdown than like a pandemic lockdown.
An actual lockdown, yeah, true. All right, well, I'd better stock up so I can, get inside. And is it that is the funeral going to be on or something? Is that what we're meant to be doing, watching the funeral?
Yes, Emerald. Oh my God.
Sorry. Isn't it? But won't it be at a funny time because it's in the UK and they're like the opposite time to us?
Oh, I'm not fucking watching that shit, though. Don't worry about that.
I'm trying to set a reminder in my calendar, Tom. Be helpful.
Obviously, we should kill a member of the royal family every year to get that public holiday, and we should do it in advance so that we know when it's going to be and then everyone can adjust it.
Yes, provide certainty and security for people.
Extraordinarily nice. She's a killer queen, gunpowder and gelatine, dynamite with a laser beam, guaranteed to blow your mind.
So with us today, we have Lulu, who is the state coordinator of Respect Inc., which is a Queensland sex worker-led organisation. Respect does like training and advocacy and peer support for and by sex workers. First off, Lulu, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yay.
We wanted to get you on. We've been hoping to kind of talk about sex work regulation and rights on the podcast for a little while, but particularly this week. Wednesday, I think, was International Sex Worker Pride Day. So we wanted to talk about, you know, what Pride's about and the state of play for regulating sex work and sex worker rights across the country, and how, like, you know, a green or left political movement can support sex workers. But maybe I'll start off, like, can you tell us just a little bit about yourself and how you started working with Respect and your experience as a sex worker?
Yeah, so my name's Lulu Holiday. I'm the state coordinator of Respect, but I've only been in that role for about 11 weeks. I started working with Respect about 4.5 years ago as a peer educator, and I've been a sex worker for about 12.5 years. I started out working in licensed brothels, and then since then I've moved across all different sectors of the industry, both legal and illegal, in small collectives and like private work, opportunistic work, and all different kinds of things.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
International Sex Worker Pride Day, like you said, was on Wednesday. It started in 2019, and it's just a time to sort of celebrate sex workers' self-determination and our achievements within the sex worker rights movement. And we've got a lot to celebrate in Queensland over this past year, and a lot to look forward to as well.
Wow. I didn't realise it was so fresh.
Yeah. We have a couple of international sex worker celebration days, and Sex Worker Pride is the most recent one.
Yeah, cool. Okay, because I think Sex Worker Pride is interesting, and we'll get into this later because there's like International Day to End Violence Against Sex Workers, and I quite like Sex Worker Pride as a counterpart to that, to kind of balance the like doom and gloom, you know, sex workers as victims, and actually look at sex workers as people with autonomy who are doing fantastic things.
It's really important to have that balance, because it's really hard to have Sex Worker Pride and, you know, that sense of community and celebration about our work and our achievements, while also recognising that because of the legal systems and the regulation systems of sex work around the world, we are still stigmatized and criminalized and discriminated against, and we don't have access to justice, and so we become targets or perpetrators of violent crimes.
Yeah. So what is the state of play? Like I would think a lot of people kind of assume that sex work is just legal in Australia and that's it. That's not quite the reality, though, across different jurisdictions, as I understand it.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. What's the kind of state of play in that regard across Australia?
Yeah, we hear that a lot when we talk about we need decriminalisation, and people would be all the time thinking, but don't we already have that? Like what even is the go with that? So sex work regulation is different in every state in Australia.
Yeah.
So in Queensland, we have what we call a licensing framework, which means that there are only 2 legal ways to be a sex worker in Queensland, and that's either in a licensed brothel, of which there's only 20 in Queensland at the moment.
Yeah. And are they all in Brisbane pretty much or Gold Coast? And the Gold Coast?
Most are in Southeast, yeah. So if you don't live in that area, you've got no option. The only other way to work legally is as a sole operator, so a private worker that works completely alone. So as you can imagine, that's not very safe. So most of us that do private work need to choose all the time whether we're going to work legally or safely, because all of our, safety strategies that we've used historically and would be used in all jurisdictions everywhere to stay safe are criminalised. So that means we can't work together in pairs or collectives, which is my favourite way to work personally. And we can't have a driver or a receptionist. So we can't have a driver that another sex worker uses or recommends to us. We can't even text another sex worker friend to say where we are on a booking. So often, it just makes sense that you would say to someone, I'm going to this address, I'll call you when I'm finished to let you know I'm safe. That's criminalised in Queensland.
Yeah. It's so wild. Like,
oh my God.
Especially when this is kind of under the auspices of sex worker safety or quote unquote protecting sex workers. It's deeply ironic. Are there instances that, examples that you can think of where this has impacted you or people that you deal with via respect, like other sex workers?
Well, the outcome of it is that about 80 or 90% of the industry work outside of the legal framework because we choose safety. So we break the law most of the time every day when we just are doing our work. But then the further impacts of that are that if something does happen to us, we feel like we can't access justice. We can't go and report to the police because we're afraid of being a known sex worker to police, because we know that does increase surveillance. We might just be, they might just turn around and arrest us for something that we've done in our work.
Yeah.
And, there's a whole other bunch of problems there as well with access to justice that we could go into, but that's not what this is about. So decriminalisation would just make a huge difference to the lives of sex workers, like most sex workers in Queensland, in relation to access to workplace health and safety, industrial rights, access to justice, all those really important things that other Queenslanders just take for granted.
Yeah, because is it particularly when it comes to dealing with police, entrapment is police can legally entrap you as a sex worker in Queensland at least, can't they?
Yeah, so what happens is usually the first thing that will catch their attention is some kind of breach of the advertising guidelines. So the advertising guidelines in Queensland are created by the PLA, Prostitution Licensing Authority. They govern all sex work advertising for brothels and private workers. So there's a bunch of words that you can't use, but there's no list of those words, so you don't actually know what they are. You just have to guess.
Okay.
We know that you can't say the word massage.
The police are like, you should know.
Yeah. Exactly. So we know that you can't say the word massage. You can't list your services. You can't use any acronyms. And you can't say any words that relate to bodily fluids. So that's what we know.
But otherwise they're just like, I shouldn't have to tell you.
Pretty much.
Now.
And so you used to be able to.
If you don't know, I shouldn't have to tell you.
That's right.
Yeah.
The PLA used to be able to write your ad, submit it to the PLA for approval before you post it, and that way you'd know that you'd be safe. but you can't even do that anymore. So you literally just have to guess. And then if you get a penalty infringement notice for an advertising breach, that also doesn't tell you what was wrong with your ad. So you don't know what to fix to stop getting fines.
Yeah.
And that's really difficult as well, because it's illegal for someone to help you put in your ad as well, which obviously, if you can imagine, if English isn't your first language, you don't know what the advertising guidelines are. You can't have someone help you. So, migrant workers are often the most targeted, the most fined, the most entrapped, and sometimes deported for things like this. Because what happens is they'll pick up an advertising breach, and then that will instigate some kind of undercover entrapment operation where a police officer can make a booking posing as a client, come to a sex worker's workplace. So if you can imagine, these days I work from home. So I'm there in my lingerie, about to open the door to a client, and sometimes it'll be a uniformed police officer, sometimes it'll be a plainclothes officer who continues with the entrapment sort of stuff as they come into my home. They can ask for an illegal service. So often it'll be like an uncovered low job, or like, can you get a friend, because you're not allowed to do threesomes. And then you don't have to actually do that service, but if you even allude to agreeing to it, they can charge you for that. And then they'll also so they'll turn around and arrest you or give you a notice to appear or something like that. And then stack charges, so like you'll get a knowingly participate in the provision of prostitution charge and a tainted goods charge, which means they take all of your cash, phones, laptops, anything that they believe was used in this illegal operation. Yeah, and unless you are found not guilty, which most people don't fight the charges, right? You just want it over with. You don't want to be known or anything. You just want it over with. So people plead guilty usually, which means they never get any of that back.
Yeah.
And Lulu, can you kind of reflect on what's going on here? Because it must be the ultimate frustration. There's much talk about the oldest profession. We know sex work is a fact of life, part of society. It's been around for a very long time. We're celebrating sex worker pride. Lots of people are in the industry because they love that work. Obviously, there is a huge demand for that work, and lots of people have been wanting sex work and engaging in it for millennia. And yet it seems that the legal framework and the political and social and moralizing status quo is to just make your lives a living hell and make that work, which is work, sex work is work, as difficult as possible to, discourage you from doing it, even though we know it's absolutely going to continue? What's actually going on here?
I think that's a part of it. These laws have been around since 1999, 2000. I think part of it was to discourage sex work. I think part of it was intended to sort of protect against, the old stigma of sex work must be related to organised crime and trafficking, which we know is a myth in Queensland, right? It also works against it because when you criminalise a worker, they can't report what's actually going on in their workplace. There's no mechanism for that worker to report to anyone what's going on in that workplace. So decriminalisation would actually make it easier for workers to report if they were being exploited or if there was criminal activity going on in their workplace.
Yeah. And it's important to note as well, because this is one thing a lot of the time, even just in terms of language around policy, for example, around drug law or other things, we're like, we want full legalization rather than decriminalization. But when it comes to sex work, that's one of the confusions is we do have a legalized framework for sex work in Queensland right now, but it's not fully decriminalized. So we actually need decriminalization. And one of the points of contention, I think, that it would be helpful for you to lay out is the contrast between folks who push for the Nordic model and people who push for full decriminalization. Like, are you able to just really quickly explain what that means and what that's about?
So the Nordic model criminalizes the client or the purchaser. The issue with that is that you're trying to discourage sex work again, right? It pushes it again underground. Sex workers don't want to dob in their clients. Clients are afraid. And so sex work is taking place in, really rushed settings where, there's less time to negotiate boundaries. You're trying to take away sex workers' income. So the Nordic model is just another version of what we have now, where you're criminalizing a bunch of people for something that, consensual sex between two adults has nothing to do with the law until there's an exchange of money. And so it's just another version of criminalisation.
Yeah.
And, when you're criminalising clients of sex workers, again, sex workers don't want to report crimes against them because then they're a known sex worker. They're going to be under surveillance, and then police are going to be picking up any client that goes to them. Yeah, it just affects every area of your life.
Yeah, I think it all, so much of this comes back to that irony around this kind of patronizing approach to sex workers that assumes that all sex workers are trafficked victims, you have no autonomy, when actually, I mean, in my experience and what I've seen of sex workers is that they're some of the best organisers I've ever seen, despite the fact that sex workers are denied access, technically a lot of the time not allowed to organise collectively in their workplace, not allowed to, form a union, offer peer support. And yet, I think that sex work has such a strong history of intersectional support because, like you pointed out, a lot of sex workers are, disproportionately, they might be migrant workers, they might be people of colour, a lot of sex workers are queer, a lot of sex workers might be poor. Historically, sex workers might be people who use drugs. Already all these people who are targeted by police and marginalised, supporting each other in some of the most impressive ways I've ever seen, to be honest. So, I think that our laws definitely need to catch up to that reality and just let sex workers do what they're able to do, which is help each other. When cops lying to themselves and everyone else that they can do that job of protecting sex workers, just bullshit.
Especially when they're the regulators of the sex industry right now, right? They need to be removed as regulators of the sex industry in order to be able to do the job of protecting sex workers when we're the victims of crime, because otherwise sex workers just don't bring complaints to police. But, we are getting somewhere. We've seen just recently, the Attorney General has referred decriminalisation of sex work to the Law Reform Commission.
Yeah.
We've been through the submission phase. We're in the consultation phase right now. Their report and draft legislation is due out in March. But we've also got a lot of other stuff going on as well, which is really moving things forward. So we saw the outcomes of the Women's Safety and Justice Task Force report. One of the recommendations of that report is full decriminalisation of sex work. We also saw, I think it was the week before last, the Anti-Discrimination Act review report was out.
Yeah.
And one of the recommendations of that report is that sex work be added as a protected attribute to the Anti-Discrimination Act. And also some of the exemptions that have previously been in that act which allowed discrimination against sex workers are recommended to be removed. So that's massive for us because one of those exemptions was around accommodation providers being able to legally discriminate against sex workers, which is just huge. We work and stay in hotels. Some of us live in hotels and tour around the country and around the state, staying in hotels. And if a hotel owner, manager, receptionist just thought that maybe you were going to use that room for sex work or that someone else might, they were allowed to kick you out.
Just wild,
And that goes for landlords of long-term leases as well. People could say no, So that's actually happened to me personally too.
All right, that's a really reasonable way to help people in the middle of a fucking housing crisis to just be able to reject someone for the work that they do. So to push them into homelessness potentially.
Yeah.
They're paying rent, landlords. What the fuck do you want?
Exactly. You don't want my money? Okay. But I think that there has been a shift. I definitely feel as though, sex workers have made progress on a range of fronts, whether it's law reform or just kind of stigma and that sort of thing. I'm curious, though, whether what your thoughts are on the way that with sex work, particularly for younger people, particularly in progressive circles, becoming, lots of people that support sex workers and sex work, then there is pushing it over into romanticizing sex work and sex workers and appropriating things that for sex workers is just a part of their life. I'm thinking of there's the OnlyFans explosion kind of thing. There's people doing pole dancing classes. There's people who wear stripper heels as an aesthetic. I mean, how do you feel about that as a sex worker?
I don't feel like I can comment on behalf of sex workers on that because everyone is individual and is going to have their own feelings about it. For me, I think more people getting into sex workers, more people accepting sex workers and accepting sex work as legitimate work. And, you know, sex worker culture has been around forever. Obviously, it evolves like anything else. But I feel like if people want to, I can't think of a better word, but appropriate sex worker culture, you know, as long as the attitude that goes along with it is not derogatory towards sex work itself and sex workers, then that's great. Yeah. Like, go for it. If it leads to wider acceptance, then beautiful.
Yeah. There's also, you know, the flip side is all the still tropes in popular culture, right? So, I mean, I haven't watched Law and Order SVU for a long time, but I mean, the number of episodes of crime investigation shows that I think have played a huge role in forming popular consciousness of the desperation, the exploitation of sex workers.
Absolutely.
And also sometimes exploring the way that the police treats sex workers too. And, you know, the crimes, particularly murder of sex workers is often treated very differently to other crimes. So there's that kind of milieu as well. But I think a really great example recently, and, you know, speak of the greed slightly, is I think Senator Jordan Steele John talking about the NDIS. There was this big blow up when Stuart Robert, who was then the minister looking after the NDIS, was outraged that any NDIS money would be going to sex workers who would be providing people with disabilities for sex work. And I think there was a really interesting moment because the overwhelming majority of reasonable people could understand why some people with disabilities wouldn't have the same relationship to a rewarding sexual life than some other people might have. And of course, we all associate sex with an important part of a fulfilling life, and people with disabilities deserve sexual pleasure as much as anybody else. And receiving that sexual pleasure is sometimes a very technical exercise that requires a professional, and people with disabilities using their money to engage with sex work to give them the love and the sexual pleasure they desire is completely legitimate. And I think Stuart Robert seemed extremely out of touch with that kind of conservative moralizing around those kind of issues.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
People often ask about what is a standard client, and there is none. The clients are all genders, all sexualities, all levels of abilities. Like, there's just no standard client. And I think the NDIS funding is meant to be about quality of life, right? And I don't know how anyone could think that the ability to book a sex worker wouldn't add to someone's quality of life.
Yeah, simple. Yeah, I think we are it's an interesting point where we are at this kind of convergence, like a crossroads of how we deal with sex work as a society, where a lot of people are rapidly starting to understand sex work better, and we are seeing progress. And at the same time, some folks are like, some things are moving in the opposite direction, and, you know, sex workers are being censored online a lot more. It's really difficult for sex workers to advertise and even just talk about stuff online. I even noticed when I was looking at, I think, one of the organization's tweets, and they literally had to censor the word intercourse. And I was like, wow, okay, it's 2022, you can't tweet the word intercourse. Like, okay, so there's definitely a long way to go in some regards. But is there anything that people can do before you go, like that our listeners can do to kind of back in sex workers to support the work that you guys are doing in Queensland or anywhere else across the country?
Yeah, absolutely. So there may be another submission process with the QLRC Law Reform Review. So if that does happen, then I would encourage people to make submissions, get in contact with Respect Inc. and Decrim QLD if you want any help with that, or if even to find out how else that you can support the movement. Then Respect and Decrim QLD will be able to help you with how to do that. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I know you probably had a really busy week with Sex Worker Pride, so we really appreciate you coming on, and have a great rest of your weekend.
Awesome. Thank you too.
See ya.
Thanks, Lulu.
Thanks. Bye.
Our call to action this week, given that it is Sex Worker Pride, is support your local sex worker organisation. Definitely, if you're in Queensland, I know Respect Inc. does really fantastic work. They often, we'll put a link in the show notes to their website. You can donate to support their work. I think they also have some good merch, and we'll also include links to a bunch of organisations across the country. There is pretty much, I think, an org in like a peer-led sex worker organization in every state and territory. And Scarlet Alliance is a good point of reference for national sex worker rights. And even if you can't, if you can't give money, if you can follow these organizations, check out what they're doing when they make a call out for help or for advocacy for reforms or things that could help sex workers live better lives and have access to the same rights as the rest of us, as all workers, then stand up and show up for them.
In Victoria, you've got the Vixen Collective, New South Wales, the Sex Workers Outreach Project, South Australia is SIN, the ACT, it is a SWAP program as well. In the NT, the Sex Workers Outreach Program. In WA, you've got the Sex Work Education, Advocacy and Rights Program, or SWARE. All they've got good acronyms. But scarletalliance.org.au is the overarching an alliance anyway, that's a good starting point too. They always do a great Mardi Gras float. So scarletalliance.org.au is a good place to check them out. That is our show. Next week, look, for all our public holiday discourse and obviously we're just so torn off about the Queen that we're not going to be doing a weekly show next week. We're going to have a little break, but we will be in your feed with a special treat next week. So keep listening to and supporting Serious Danger. But obviously, we're just taking some time to grieve and to mourn and think about that old lady.
And that's normal. Yeah. Before we talk about anything at all. In the meantime, as always, remember you can support the show on Patreon for just $3 a month. Head to seriousdangerpod.com. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at seriousdangerau. You can send us an email, hello@seriousdangerpod.com, and you should tell 2 to 3 people that you like this week that they should listen to Serious Danger because it's a funny and informative podcast.
It's a place where you get to hear Tom Ballard jokes. Try it out for the first time.
Exclusive. First look. Yeah.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye.
Thanks. Mwah.
Serious Danger Australia.